In this video, I'm going to show you how to knit the Honeycomb Brioche Stitch in 2 colors. This is a simpler version of this pattern. There is a more advanced version for which I've provided a different video and I've given you the link in the description field. The advanced version will provide the pattern with a different look, and this is what it'll look like. It has more of a honeycomb look than this simpler version, but the reason it's more advanced is because it uses brioche type knitting stitches in it. So if you're not familiar with brioche and you're looking for a simpler version to knit, then this version here isn't too bad. If you've done the honeycomb brioche pattern in 1 color, and I've done a video on that last year, I've provided a link to that as well in the description field. If you've done that, then this pattern uses the same type of stitches except in 2 colors. If you haven't done that, you can certainly go check that out. Try it out first in 1 color, or you could just jump right in and try it in 2 colors. I would put this pattern at maybe an advanced beginner level. If you're really comfortable with knitting and purling, then you should be, I think you should be able to do this one. With this one, actually, we don't even do any purl, we just do knitting, but there is one little tricky part and I'll show you how to do that. Now the fabric itself lays pretty flat, and you can see when I stretch it that it actually does have a honeycomb look to it. But if I don't stretch it, then it almost forms these nice little rows in the 2 colors. This is the right side, and this is what the back side of the fabric will look like. And it's very thick and squishy. So let me show you how it's knit. I've provided the pattern in the description field. You don't need double pointed needles for this simpler version. I'm just using them for this demonstration. Now the pattern is knit on an even number of stitches, and there's a setup row and followed by 4 rows. So for the setup row, it's just knit all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a regular knit. And I've cast on, as I said, I think 10 stitches here. So as long as it's an even number, the pattern will work as I'm showing you. And you only do the setup row once. So you cast on the stitches and do the setup row in the same color, and I'm going to designate that as my main color, which for the purposes of this demonstration is going to be this lighter pink color. And then you turn your work and you do row 1 and row 2 in the contrasting color, which in this case I'm going to use this brown color. Rows 3 and 4 you're going to then do in the main color. So for row 1, take your contrasting color, leave about a 4-inch tail or so, and just make a loop like that. And you're going to slip the first stitch without doing anything to it. So insert as if to knit or as if to purl and just pull it over. If the stitch is loose, you can tug on the yarn a little bit to tighten it. And then you're going to take your contrasting color and you're going to knit the first stitch. So insert, put the color on, the contrasting color on, and just do a regular knit. Now the second stitch is a knit 1 below. So you're not knitting into the stitch itself, but you're knitting into the hole that is formed with the actual stitch that's below it. So if you can see here, I'm knitting into this hole right here. So insert into that hole and knit it. You're going to bring the stitch out through that same hole, and then you're going to drop this stitch, and it'll feel really weird to drop it because you haven't really done any knitting to the stitch itself, so you'll think you're going to miss the stitch, but you're not. We're going to pick up this drop stitch on the next row. So for now, you're just going to drop it, and that's doing a knit 1 below or a K1B. That's the repeat for the whole row. You're going to do knit 1 below. And you'll keep doing that until you get to the last stitch. And when you get to the last stitch, you're going to bring the yarn to the front and then slip that last stitch. Okay? And turn your work. That's row 1 done. Now for row 2, you're still going to continue with the contrasting color. So for row 2, you're going to slip the first stitch. Now for this next stitch, you're going to do a knit 2 together. And to do the knit 2 together, the 2 stitches that you're knitting are the first stitch that's already on the needle, but for the second stitch we're going to find that drop stitch that we had dropped in the previous row when we did the knit 1 below. So to do that, you just have to go into the stitch right here and tease it a little bit, and you'll see how the stitch has two loops. Here's the one loop, and here's the other looser loop. That's the loop you're looking for. You're going to insert your needle into that looser loop, then you're going to insert it into the first stitch, and you're going to knit both of them together like this, and you're going to drop both of them together. So that's the knit two together that we're doing. So we do a knit two together and then a knit one. Here we go again. Let's find that loop, and you may have to tease it out a little bit to find that loosey loop, as I call it, and then insert it through that and the actual stitch, knit through both loops and drop, knit one. And you keep doing this until you get to the last stitch. When you get to the last stitch, you're just gonna slip it, and you're gonna leave the yarn in the back. Actually, you're gonna bring the yarn to the front again, and you're gonna slip it. Okay. And turn your work. So rows 1 and 2 done in the contrasting color. We're gonna go back to the main color to do rows 3 and 4. Rows 3 and 4, you're gonna actually slip the first stitch. We're slipping all first stitches in this pattern, so we're going to slip the first stitch. I slip with for this pattern, I slip like this with the yarn in the front, and then I take the yarn to the back. Okay, and the pattern will be knit one below, knit one. So now for the first stitch, you're going to knit one below, and I'm going to try and really stretch this out here so you can hopefully see the little hole, the little knit one below hole right here that I'm going to knit through, and drop that stitch and knit one below, knit one below, knit one below, knit one. You can keep doing this all the way to the end, and then the very last stitch you're just going to knit. And that's row 3 done in the main color. You're going to turn, and row 4 is also done in the main color. You're going to slip the first stitch, take the yarn to the back, then you're going to do a knit one, and then that same knit two together. Again, we're going to find that drop stitch. This time it's in the other color. You're going to find that drop stitch, insert your needle through that, through the stitch, knit two together. So your repeat for this last row is knit one, knit two together. And you'll do that until you get to the last stitch, which you are just gonna knit. And that's it. That's the pattern, rows 1 through 4. You're gonna turn your work and start again. Rows 1 and 2 you'll do with the contrasting color, rows 3 and 4 with the main color. And pretty soon your work will start to look like this. And then when you're done, you can end on a row 4 in your main color, and then you can cast off your work in that same color, and then that way you get the same edge for the cast on edge as well as the bind off edge. You get it with the same color. And by slipping the stitches, you also get the same color edging on both sides of the pattern. So you can certainly decide to make a scarf maybe with this pattern, or a cowl, or an afghan, or a wrap. I think this pattern will work for a lot of different things. One thing I will say both about this pattern as well as the Honeycomb Brioche pattern in the advanced version, it does provide a very thick fabric. So if you wanted to make a shawl or a wrap and you want to have a nice drape to the fabric, then you might want to go with a slightly thinner yarn, maybe a fingering weight yarn, or just a very light worsted weight yarn rather than a bulky yarn, because there's no harm in using a bulky yarn. A bulky yarn will just give you a thicker fabric. So it might work great for a really warm blanket if you wanted to use a bulky yarn. But if you want something with a really nice drape, then I would go with the fingering yarn. The one thing with the fingering yarn is then when you're knitting that stitch below, you may have to really stretch it out to see that stitch below to knit into it. But I think it should still work. So I hope you give this one a try. Please let me know if you have any questions, leave me comments, click the like button if you like the video, and subscribe to my channel for all my upcoming videos. Thanks for watching and happy knitting!